Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. You can see my hair standing on end. We've been having such fun and games behind the scenes here tonight. Anyway, so I'm not surprised that we are because usually when we have these types of guests and sharing this type of content, we have fun and games. However, Jamie and I have decided we are going to soldier on. We're having lots and lots of technical issues in the background here tonight. And if the worst comes to the worst, I will cut the show and then we will do a recording. We will pre record and then put it on that way. So thank you for your patience, everybody. We are on South African time tonight. So without any further ado, the lady of the day, Jaymee Jay. That's where she's supposed to be, you see. Well, I hope she'll be on very soon. So, hello, Jamie.
I really don't know, Chantelle. I'm literally sitting right on the floor, almost on top of my router, trying to make it work. I have no idea what's going on. Anyways.
Well, I'm so happy to have you on the show. And I know we kind of like about 40 minutes late, somewhere around there. But hey, we are here. And I'm very grateful that you are here, Jamie. So welcome as a first time guest and
Thank
certainly not the
you.
last time. And it's really, really great to have you here. Other than our technical issues we've been experiencing, how are you?
Hi, yeah, I don't know. It seems like you're still cutting out. I really don't know. I think we might have to cut out and record. But so yeah, if I cut out next time, I say we just cut out and record a show because it's just horrible. Anyways, hi, thanks for having me on. We're gonna get this information
Let
out
me
one
just
way or
let me
another
just ask the
because
guest.
can you hear me?
Oh my goodness, guys. Are you back?
I think there's a delay for sure. Also, I don't know if you can hear me.
I think we should record. And I know that
Yeah,
the
it's
guests, I mean, that
just too
our viewers are
frustrating.
going to hate it. Yeah.
Sorry if you have an audience right now.
Okay.
Maybe
I
I
think,
don't know if they
guys,
can
what
just
we're going to do is we're going
send
to,
their questions or something.
there's such a delay, and I'm speaking over you. Okay. Guys, I think what we're going to do is we're going to maybe just cut the show for now. Um, we really having lots of internet problems here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pre-record, and then in the next day or so, we're going to have the show up with Jamie again. So I think that is probably our best solution. Um, yeah, I'm just seeing if anything is happening there. I just want to make sure from you guys, the viewers, though, can you actually hear me when I'm speaking? I just want to make sure that if you can hear Jamie, can you guys hear me or can you hear Jamie? Okay, you can hear me. Are you guys able to hear Jamie when she speaks? Okay, they can hear us both. Jamie, can you hear me? Okay, guys. Doesn't seem like this is going to work. We've tried. And I
I just
know
tried one more
it's
thing.
interesting,
I just
this.
tried one more thing. I don't
Very
know.
interesting that you guys can hear. And I know both our internets are showing full. Yeah. I think the issue's coming from Jamie's internet. Are you back?
I have no idea. Like I said,
Okay.
I bought a booster and everything. I don't know. It's I don't think there's anything else in my control for the internet. It's showing I have bars. I'm sitting right beside the router. I bought a booster. I updated everything. I don't it appears to be working now, but it's yeah, I've never actually had this level of tech difficulties. I have no idea. Does it seem like it's working now though? Is the delay off?
It's definitely sounding better now. So I'm
Okay.
wondering if you should just speak and then
Okay.
I won't interrupt you because it seems when we both talk, there's a delay. So I'm going to then hand over to you and I'm just going to let you go with it.
Okay.
And if there's an issue, then we'll catch it. But if not, then you just carry on, yeah? So I'll just be sitting listening in the background.
Okay. Okay, let's try this one
Perfect.
more time. Thanks to the audience, thanks to the audience for being patient. I'm just thrown off a little bit from stress as well, but I'm gonna just focus and center, and we're gonna soldier on because what we're gonna talk about today is really important information, and we're gonna talk about it and get it out one way or another. So we're just gonna do it. One of the reasons that me and Chantelle connected is just over the issue of like ritual abuse and Montauk and programming and you know all this stuff is kind of like a common interest we both had. I'm a really avid reader. I've tried to read every single survivor's testimony. Like my house is full of books. I've just dedicated basically my life to trying to understand this level of evil because I really feel that ritual abuse is the underlying problem to every other problem on our planet. And I feel like a lot of other shows focus on the surface symptoms of what's going on. But the thing is that SRA is happening at another level below the conscious mind that we're all in a consensual reality of. So the causes of all the things are being programmed in at the subliminal level, and the evil's coming into this dimension through the back door of the subconscious of the innocent, really. And I think if we keep just trying to look at the symptoms, we're never going to understand where this is actually coming from because it's coming from a subliminal level. And so that's why I've spent so much time researching it. And I really feel like it's the key to everything. I feel like if we can help set these captives free, help people to get break free of their mind control, that you know this is going to be the solution to all the problems we're facing on the planet right now. I really believe that.
Can you hear me? I just want to make sure.
I can.
Okay, perfect. I think it's amazing what you're saying, and it's so true because, you know, when we talk, knowledge is power. So when we understand what's going on with our survivors and what's really been going on in the underbelly of the world, not only does it respect the survivors who've gone through what they've been through, but it also sheds light. And once we shed light on these topics, obviously it dissolves, right? It just dissolves and it brings light and awareness. I think awareness right now is the key. What are you finding, just as a matter of fact, Jaymee, when we talk about awareness, do you think the level of awareness is increasing from your perspective you know, the general populace, or do you think we actually becoming more woke, more woke and less awake generally from your perspective?
I think that it's both. I think there's kind of a small percentage of people that are like almost would present as having some type of mental illness because their consciousness is expanding so quickly that these are a lot of the like empathic people, the gifted people, the like high IQ people, the people that are like actually evolving so quickly and so rapidly, almost like AI. Like it's like the amount of learning and acceleration of consciousness for like a certain percentage of people is you know, almost like more than they can bear for the level that it's coming at them. And there's a certain percentage of people trying to do that. And then there's another kind of middle group of people that are you know, kind of like not right on the vanguard like those other people, but they're taking in the information at a slower pace, and that the mass in the middle is coming up a little bit. And then there's a group of people that are like sticking their heels in even further and going more into defense mechanisms and more into denial and more refusal to expand. And there's kind of a dialectic going on right now of those two opposing forces that are actually synthesizing into expansion, but it's definitely both. I think there's people going both ways, and I think everybody's choosing, you know, which way to go. And I think the people that are going more into denial, I mean, it's gonna keep them away from the stress that the people on the vanguard are putting themselves through in order to be on the forefront of the expansion. But that's only temporary, because it's not actually going to protect them from anything, because this information is coming in a huge wave. But yeah, it's especially with the SRA information, like this is like, I was so happy in about 2013 when like some of the stuff started coming public, you know, because I had been researching it for so long, and it was like nobody was talking about this stuff publicly. And then there was kind of this break in 2013, like with some of the Pizzagate stuff and, you know, like the Podesta emails. And so it started to come into the mainstream vernacular. And I was really excited at that point. I was like, oh, it's breaking through the dam. Like this stuff's coming out. Everybody's going to know. And then kind of watching the levels of people fighting the information coming out and trying to go more into denial and trying to cover it up again. So it kind of just delayed, but it's coming out. It really, really is coming out. And the number one tool I think of abusers is isolation, whether it's a cult, whether it's bureaucracy in government, and or like keeping information from people. And now these abusers, like they really, once they gave us the internet, which they're trying to kind of take back and give us a fake internet, but it's kind of too late. And the amount of communication and the amount of information available to people and the amount of corroboration so that survivors know they're not crazy. There's so many other people out there who are doing it from the safety of their home, putting out their stories, that I think that's actually what they lost control of. And I don't think that can be reversed. And I think there's just a time lag, kind of like our podcast right now, where the information is out, but it hasn't actually been absorbed by people. But it's already out. It's already been exposed. It's just, it takes time. Like even for me, the time it takes to read all the books is not instant, right? Like it takes time to take the information into yourself.
What do you find with all the books you've read and the research you've done over the years? What do you find is the common thread amongst SRA survivors, the ones that have thrived, that have sort of, you know, the survivors that are talking and what have you, in terms of their abuse? What is the thing you've noticed the most? What is the most common abuse that you've seen and read? And what do you think is the thing that would most help survivors at this point to, I want to say, set themselves free? Because speaking and sharing, I think that does in a huge way set people free.
I think the biggest thing for people to overcome, and this is for all of us, but specifically survivors, because what they exploit the most is love and attachment bonds. And that might not be the answer people expect. They're expecting me to talk about all the horrible things, but none of the horrible things work without the trauma bonding and the exploitation and inversion of the love energy. And so in order to break free, it's overcoming the attachment to the abusers. It's overcoming the Stockholm syndrome. It's overcoming cult loyal parts, which we all have, even to having these governments on the earth. There's a part of us that wants a master, you know, that wants to be a slave. And so that's the part that needs to be overcome, is that attachment to abusers. And for a lot of survivors that I've listened to their story, that's one of the hardest things to overcome, is the attachment to abusers, and also the guilt and shame of forced perpetration. Those are the two things that are kind of the pin in the fire hydrant, I call them. Like, if those things can be overcome, everything else, just kind of like a Tetris game, starts to unravel itself. But those are the things that hold all the rest together. And so, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sure does. And it's very interesting because I was doing a show with Beverly Rhodes last night, and she was, when she was a child, she was a vampire nanny, basically. Um, when we talking about um, her abusers and kind of like the Stockholm syndrome, right? And what we were saying about the vampires, and what she was saying last night about the vampires, is that the way to get rid of them or to keep them away is not with garlic, as myth suggests. It's with rose petal water, pink rose petal water. Now, isn't that interesting? Because rose pink, that's the color of the heart chakra, right? And love, obviously, roses represent love, pink represents love. So the thing that they fear the most is love. And obviously, also the thing that they are lacking the most, which is why they fear it the most. So that's exactly, I just found that interesting last night, that is the thing that keeps the vampires away, is literally symbolism of love. So again, it's the opposite. We should do the opposite, right? Of everything, because everything has been so damn inverted in terms of, I mean, I know everyone on the, well, most people on this platform, I know we understand these things. We've been talking about these things from day one. And really, it's about undoing the harm that's been done, undoing the programming, and more as well, reading more and more books about the programming. It is so specific in the way they do it, right? Okay, I'm back. So, there's specific programming they use for specific girls or boys or purposes. What do you, in your experience of the research you've done, what have you found is the most commonly used programming that they would use on kids, especially kids? I mean, it all starts with kids, really, doesn't it? Majority of it starts with kids and babies, and of course these bloodline families.
Yeah, the programming's really only effective if it's applied while the mind is being formed. I know there's a lot of propaganda movies out there, like The Bourne Identity or La Femme Nikita, where it's like, oh, they took somebody in their 20s and put them through a program and now they're a super soldier. And it's like, no, the mind doesn't actually get fractured. What they do is prevent it from forming in a unified way as it's forming. And that's really the power that they have. Is to do that to children as their mind is forming. They're forming it in the way they want it to be. So it never had a chance to be different. It's very hard to change a human. We all know how stubborn people are. Like, it's very hard to program somebody older. They want to put the programming in as a person's forming their identity, and actually preventing them from even having their own identity, and making their identity an extension of the will of the programmer's identity. So they're just replicating themselves into other people before they have a chance to individuate, is really what the programming is. With the most common programming, there's different factions that do different types of programming. So there's kind of old ancient satanic SRA that's been around forever, and that this is including in some of the Viking, like how they would make Viking soldiers. Like, there's just this ancient technology of abuse that's been around since the beginning of time. with around World War II, when, you know, groups had unlimited test subjects to do unethical experiments on, they were able to really actually mechanize and make a scientific method to apply this, which is really like where the MK Ultra program came along. And then as technology's been involved, they've been able to use it in a way that's really, you know, made it really mechanized, really consistent across the board, and really just a program that they just basically need to find a victim to put into this machine that's already like a well-greased self-running machine. They don't, it's not that complicated anymore. However, the themes that they use for the programming, even though they'll use high technology now, it still goes back to the ancient technology. So the things that what was something we're going to discuss today was this book that just came out, and I'm sorry, it's probably backwards, but it's Laura Worley's books, Puzzle Pieces Together, Hidden Knowledge. This is the third book in a series that she's written. It just came out. I'm probably the first person to read it, and I'm actually not even done yet. So I will come back with an update when I'm done. But really what Laura Worley has discovered is that there's templates that they've been using on everybody, because think about how complicated it would be to have to do a very specific program for each person. And of course, every program person puts their own spin using their imagination on their own programming, and that's what makes it effective. But they have to have a template because they're doing this in mass. The goal of programming is a new world order. They're programming slaves and they're programming soldiers. And the whole goal of all this programming is to have an army of mind-controlled slaves that can take over. And so they need to have a very mechanized program to do that. It's like when people go into the military, they don't all get their own basic training. They go into the programs that are already set up and work like clockwork. And so I would say that Laura Worley's books and research are on par to when Fritz Springmeier came out with his book exposing, like, it's that significant what she's actually uncovered for templates. So anybody that's researching this, I will say this is required reading material, just like reading Fritz Springmeier's books is like required reading material to understand ritual abuse and trauma-based mind control. What Laura's uncovered is basically the Kabbalistic programming, which is an inverted Sephiroth tree of death programming that is put into all survivors everywhere, not just in those factions of that religion. They use different ancient religions. They use a pantheon of deities, entities, religions, like they kind of blend it all together. But one of the main programs that they put in is the tree of death. Like that is their main template that they put across the board in programmers. So anybody that wants to understand this, or anybody that's working with survivors, or anybody that wants to actually know what the actual programs are, you've got to read these books. Now, Laura's a survivor herself, and she says that just because you have all your memories back doesn't mean you're free, because they've actually embedded internal structures. And so she believed she was free for a long time because she had her memories, but she was still able to be accessed because she had not removed the actual internal structures. And so that's basically what she's trying, that's the gist of the information she's trying to get out to people so that they understand that. So yeah, I just really really recommend her books for anybody that's researching this or is working with survivors.
Okay, I can kind of hear every second or third word you're saying. So I'm assuming and hoping that the viewers can hear. But I'm getting the gist of what you're saying. And I've actually got that book as well and reading it currently at the moment, which is unbelievably fascinating. And I fully agree. And I've always been saying, you know, that there is a template. They always use, these guys aren't very creative. I mean, they might be as cruel as can be. They might be as nasty as can be. They might be as smart as hell, but they're not creative in the way they do things. They've kind of taken everything that God has already created and literally inverted it and used specific codes, keys, templates, etc. And I think if you look at so many of the Brotherhood factions as well, they might be called different things, but really at the end of the day, they're pretty much one and the same. They might be coating it with different color or different flavored icing, but really they're pretty much all succumb or honor the same Lord, right? And not the Jesus of Christ either. We're talking the Lord of Darkness here. But it's super interesting how they actually go about doing that. And it's like repetition. And it's very interesting what you're saying about there being layers almost within the structures and then layers within that. And then each and every one of those layers has like an entity that looks after it. I know Jessie Zaboto has explained some of that type of programming to us in the past. It's like she explains it as like a filing system. So there's like a filing cabinet, and each drawer has a demonic entity that looks after it. So you would need to get past that entity. And as you open the drawer, there's files within the drawer, right? And each of the files have another entity looking after it. And then you would go into the files, and then each document has another entity looking after it. So it makes perfect sense, you know, what you're saying about the layers within the layers, right? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and the thing to understand about entities is they're also in a hierarchy of a chain of command. So they're not creative either, and they're only operating on reward and punishment. So they're like AI almost. They have a thing they're compelled to do and will keep trying to do it in an automated fashion. And so that's why you can't like negotiate or like, you know what I mean? Like it's like they're like little AI bots almost, like, that are doing their job, and it's a hierarchy of jobs. And so yeah, the layering in of those at each level is like a hierarchy, right? So um when you get the ones higher up, you don't have to go into every single file and go back down and get every single one, because those ones are all in a chain to the higher ones. So when you start getting into these core programmings and removing the actual, centers of where they're coming from, it is like a tree. Like when you take the root and the stump out, then you're taking the branches out as well. And so a lot of times people working with survivors are like trying to like deal with each leaf, right? And that can just take your whole lifetime, and you're never actually getting to the core, right? To use the tree analogy. So it's like you have to actually get to the trunk and the root, which is like these base core programmings that they've put in all survivors. And they do it like clockwork. They do it at the same age, the same things, the same time, the same templates. And because we're all connected in a collective unconscious or in the quantum field, now that they have technology to do things even with VR, it's like there's no variation. It's the exact replica of that exact same thing going into another person's consciousness, which puts it all back into the quantum consciousness. So like the level that they've been able to do programming at by keeping it consistent and the same has been like amplified by this technology and by keeping it consistent. And so what they've basically done is program their new world order into the minds and the bodies and the cells of survivors, and then they want to activate it at some point to come forth. But because they've replicated it so perfectly, it's like that's kind of what gives it the power, right? And that's why these occultists are so obsessed with like repetition and dates and everything being exact and repetition, because that's where the power is, right? Like when there's a ritual that happens every Christmas for hundreds of years, every single time that energy is not happening independent as an independent event, it's connected through time and amplified by all the repetition through the past. And so they're able to do that in the minds of survivors now. And I know some people are familiar with like Alice Bailey and Madame Blavatsky's this concept of the externalization of the hierarchy. And what I always want to add to that is that they've put the hierarchy inside of survivors. It's the internalization of the hierarchy, and then there will be the externalization. But there is no externalization if they didn't actually put it internally into people to bring forth. And that's their whole plan.
Jaymee, I'm wondering if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, I think you can. I can't hear you. I can hear nothing. So I'm sitting here and I feel like this is the worst interview I've done, Jaymee. I
This
apologize.
is the worst
But I'm going
interview
to
I've
ask you
ever
what you
done
were
too.
saying earlier on was something about Viking programming. What can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I find that very interesting. With the if you're looking at the first, you look at the First Nation. I mean, the Vikings are known to be First Nation people, but of course also quite violent in the way and the way that they've been trained with the berserker training, stuff like that as well. I'd be interested to know if you have, if you know anything about that.
Can the audience hear me?
Yeah, I'm
Anyways,
sure they can. For some reason,
okay,
you and me are having a problem hearing each other, I think. And but that's why
okay,
I'm letting it run because the audience can hear. So as long as
okay,
that's
okay.
just what I'm saying. I can't hear you though. I can hardly hear a word you're saying, but I'm just kind of catching everything every now and again.
Okay. Yeah, this is definitely the worst interview I've ever done either, but we're gonna do it. And maybe we'll do a better show after as well, because this information is really important. But yeah, as to do with the Vikings, this is something I'm not an expert on, but I've actually been researching a little bit lately because another thing that Laura Worley really uncovered in her books was how much of this is orchestrated by the Druids and the ancient Druid bloodlines. And the thing about the Druids, which kind of differs from, say, the Masons, is, and they're very interconnected, but some of these organizations are merit based. So they're just like a straight satanic mindset of hierarchy, survival of the fittest. It's based on what you can do, right? It's not who you are. Whereas these Druidic, they're obsessed with the bloodline, so like they're going to make you into who you are based on who your bloodline is. They don't like it's different, right? So these ancient Druid bloodlines have been working since the beginning of time. And I was kind of interested because there was so much of this Viking stuff going on, and I'll get into that in a second. But I was wondering what the connection between the Druids and the Vikings were, because I thought they seem really similar, like in the nature worship and the pantheons and the stuff like that. But they're actually different. And so there's the Druidic bloodline, and then there's this like Vikings bloodlines, and they didn't actually connect until, and I don't know the exact year, but things were pretty isolated. And at some point, some Vikings from Norway had taken, like, well, I don't know if they were taken or married or whatever, but we'll say it was a little of a blurred line back then, whether they were taken as slaves or married or whatever. But they took the Welsh women and then they went to Iceland. And so that's when the Druidic line and the Norwegian line started to blend together. And then they were taken to Iceland, where it was a very isolated, like right now, they're still trying to get a DNA bank from Iceland because it's almost like the Amish, where it's been unmixed with anything. And so, when you look at the Icelandic bloodlines, that's actually where the Vikings and the Druids actually came together and then have kind of like an isolated bloodline. And if you look at Hitler and what Hitler was doing, he was taking all of this Viking stuff and then presenting it as Germanic, but it was actually, he was obsessed with the bloodlines of Eric the Red and these like red-haired, blue-eyed bloodlines for the programming. And even a lot of what Joseph Mengele was doing with trying to change the eye colors and stuff was like trying to get this Nordic bloodline. And so I think if anybody wants to do research on that, I think it's really key to stuff like, I don't know the secrets of why Hitler was specifically wanting the Viking bloodline, but if you look at the book, I think it's called The Coming Race or something, about the Thule Society, it was the Nordics, right? However, it's important to keep in mind that it is separate from the Druids until it combines with through Iceland. Anyways, so when I was researching some of this, and I'm glad you brought up the Berserkers, because for people that don't know, the Berserkers were a type of Viking, like original super soldier, you could say. But they would go into trance and they almost would like embody animal like spirits, like bears and stuff like that. And they were really, really good for war because they were able to just basically go berserk, and they were doing magic mushrooms and all this other stuff. But these people weren't actually able to be integrated back into the tribe because they had such bad PTSD, and they would like sometimes lash out at their own, they weren't safe to have back in the village after. And so it was kind of a lot of them had to be like go live in exile and be recluses because they weren't able to ever come back from this state of berserker. And what's interesting is if you read The Black Awakening by Russ Dizdar, when he was uncovering these subpersonalities in the super soldiers and they were preparing for this Black Awakening, which is the, externalization of the programmed hierarchy, is this Black Awakening when these super soldiers will come forth. It was called berserker programming. And so they were specifically taking that from the Vikings.
Wow. I believe that's what I'm saying. I totally believe that, and also having read up quite a bit on the Druids, because what I'm reading, and also in one of the books that we're talking about, is that the Druids literally are the head of all evil, right? So whatever, it's like them passing down their knowledge or their ways of doing things. And it makes a lot of sense to me that the Druids would be head of, at the top of evil. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about why that is in your experience.
I will say that if you look at the royal family, they are Druidic and they are the earth worship. And this is why King Charles has the Terra Carta, where it's worshiping the earth. It's worshiping the creation instead of the creator. And so if you look into kind of what they're doing, it is Druidic, like it is the earth worship, right? And that's why all of this environmentalism stuff is really Druidism, where basically they want to extinct the human race to save the planet, and this is kind of the the earth worship. This kind of environmental thing has become like a religion, right? Like it's a religion, and there's blasphemy if you speak against it, and I'm all about caring for the earth, but it's just the way that it's being done with like legal things and making these like zones of what are they called, sanctuary zones and all these things. Like it's very much this. If you understand with the Druids, a lot of what they're doing with the Terra Carta specifically will start to make sense. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought here. So sorry, can you ask me your question again? I think I went off track.
No, all good. And again, yeah, I'm sitting here smiling, and I'm just grateful that that everyone can hear, because I'm definitely gonna re-listen to this interview. I'm sure I have tons of questions from the things that I'm missing out. Yeah, it was really about the Druids, and also, their connection, which you explained earlier on, to the Vikings, and that type of training, and how that all also began, because it's definitely strongly entrenched in those ways. But it's interesting for me then, when you're looking at the First Nations people, like, for example, would be, of course, the Vikings, the Scots, the Irish, right? Then, of course, we have the Native American Indians, we have the Bushmen, we have the Australian Aboriginals, right? It's such a difference. I'm wondering, if you've ever thought about that, because for me, it's like there's polarization in, let's talk about the First Nation people and the first law, LORE, right, of the land. And it's so true what you're saying. It's like the earth worship, making creating this amazing earth for no humans. And that's not right either, because earth is definitely, there's a difference between respecting the earth, right, and worshiping and making that a god, because the earth herself is not, it's not God. But the importance of respecting that is so important. And I think that's where the discernment lies as well, don't you think, in terms of how we, as the general populace, actually perceive that, right?
Yeah, and if you look at the First Nation, like they didn't see themselves as separate from the earth. They were part of it and respected it as a whole that they were a part of. And so again, that's been twisted away. I just want to go back a little bit because there's quite a bit in what you said. But if you look back at the Nordic stuff, so if you look at Odin and the All Father and stuff, like he had one eye. So when you look at all this one eye symbolism, it's like there is a connection back to Odin. And if you look at the the Kabbalistic tree of life, you can actually take the runes, and the runes actually fit on the Kabbalah, which I find really interesting how that could happen, being not deliberate. And then you look at both of the tree worship, whether it's the Odin's tree or the tree of life, like there's so much of this, and then it's like this whole tree thing has actually been in our face the whole time. It's like the Axis Mundi, it's all there. It's all connected to this tree. It's it goes back to the Bible. It's all in there. And so to go back to the Nordics and the First Nations, so those are two very specific bloodlines, actually. And if you look at the history of Canada, and I think there's been a lot exposed about, the residential school systems and stuff in Canada that I won't go into on the show because it's just a huge thing that is just a whole separate show. But something I've been looking at is, when I look at all the history of what they were actually doing to the natives, I mean, to me, it's so obvious they were trying to program them and make them dissociative. It wasn't just abuse for the sake of abuse. It was specific abuse with an agenda to try and program these native bloodlines. And it might be a little controversial what I'm saying, and I don't want to offend anybody. I don't know if people always really can understand what I'm trying to say, but I don't believe that First Nations can be programmed the way that white Nordics can. And I think that's why Hitler specifically was looking for the bloodlines of Eric the Red and the Nordics, because of the ability for dissociation and programming, and because they wanted to try and do that to the native bloodlines. And they tried really hard. Like, I can't say the numbers of people that were killed of them trying to figure out a way to program natives, and it doesn't seem to actually work on them the same. Like, they'll have trauma, but if SRA works perfectly, you can't see the trauma. They go and become a functional person with back doors. They're not unable to function and having PTSD symptoms, right? But with the native bloodlines, it's like generational PTSD symptoms. It's not able to be segmented in fractions. And my theory is it's because they're so connected to everything. They're connected to their ancestors. They're connected to nature. Like, they're not in their left brain where things can be compartmentalized. Like, they're always in their right brain anyway. So when they try to program, it's like, I don't think, I mean, maybe they've had success with some numbers, but I don't think the same trauma-based mind control works the same. And I think that's a goal they've always had, is to try to figure out the formula for trauma-based mind control on these native bloodlines, because they're so psychic and all these things that they really want to be able to get in there and program them. But for some reason, I don't think they've figured out the formula. I think they've caused so much carnage and death and generational trauma trying to figure it out. And I don't think they've actually been successful. Some people might argue with me on that because they know, like, survivors, but the only survivors I know, their neighbors, are ones that it didn't work on. So I don't know.
It would make sense to me, and again, I'm just going back to what I heard you say earlier, that it's harder or it's more difficult to program like one of the First Nation people, right? It would make sense because, to me, they have a much stronger connection to the essence of nature, of the earth, but also working in harmony with it, not, understanding how to work with nature and the elements and stuff like that, as opposed to using it. Because when you're speaking to some of the survivors here in South Africa and Africa as well, they were used, the Khoisan, which is obviously, you know, part of the First Nation here, who have been highly trafficked, highly abused. In fact, there's like Khoisan breeding programs here, stuff like that, because of their gifts and abilities, right? There's a huge price on their heads. And according to what Beverly Rhodes was telling us, they're like the kids, they're known as the kids with the lion eyes. So obviously, for lots of different reasons, they are trafficked. But when it comes to spiritual gifts, obviously, they have a lot of strong spiritual gifts to the ancestors, etc. And when it's come to a lot of programming as well, they've used the Khoisan people. In fact, the ones that they have been able to turn, and I see this because the Khoisan king, not too long ago, there was a whole lot of photographs of him at one of his birthday parties with all these New World Order guys surrounding him and celebrating his birthday. So you have to know he has been turned. But then he would be used to weaponize kids, like they would be sent to him for programming as well, using the natural spiritual gifts of the Khoisan people.
Yeah, I really like I was saying
And
to
it's
you,
powerful.
I've only read one book of a survivor out of South Africa, which was Casey Winterburn, which I also really recommend her books. I think she wrote like 4 books, and they're like at the back of Amazon. You'll never find them. So I just wanted to actually say, go look up Casey Winterburn's books if you're interested in that story, because she actually did an excellent job of programming. Like her books are really, really worth reading, and I don't know if she's getting any attention or people reading her books. So, but that's the only one I've read out of South Africa. But again, these kind of SRAs happening, they've been doing it all over the world. So, you know, it's really obvious actually if you look at all of what they call like disaster capitalism, where they will go and there'll be a natural, and I'm putting that in air quotes, disaster, and then they have all these orphan separated children which already have a trauma base for doing programming, and then there's also laws where they can take the children into a type of like foster care or whatever, and then in different countries that they're not a citizen, so there's kind of these legal loopholes where they can get these kids and do programming, and they've done programming on all types of people all over the world. You know, it's been a goal of these groups is to be global, right? So they've been going since, you know, I can't give an exact date, but I mean, I'd say putting a serious effort since the 50s to go and put consulates in every country and make sure that they're basically getting their tentacles over the whole earth before they kind of pull this web together to try and bring in their new world order. So like they've gone into every country, and there's not a lot of survivors coming out. Like most of them are from the States or Britain, or Canada's huge in SR. Like Canada, I think they've been doing almost more here than the States. If you really look back at history, it's just that nobody suspects Canada, and it is connected to the residential schools, but like there's a lot more darkness. Canada has this kind of like nice veneer, but it's actually one of the darkest places for programming. But I'm hoping that more survivors come out internationally, because they have done this everywhere. I just don't know if people in these countries realize they're connected to these bigger MK Ultra programs, right? Like they think it's just these aid programs, you know, that have come to their countries and stuff. They don't actually realize that it's connected to these like international programming and trafficking agendas.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Casey Winterburn, yes, she's. I've actually wrote her name, and I'll put it in there in the comment section. Yeah, she's. I actually have had a couple of conversations with her behind the scenes. She was in fact, an ex-Rhodesian survivor who's moved to South Africa, and I've mentioned some of her story on air. She's never been interviewed, but she has given me permission to mention some of the things that took place here. And it is absolutely horrific. If you think about, and now, especially here in South Africa as well, because this the whole of Africa, but especially South Africa, because South Africa is like the capital of Africa, right? So I mean, the child trafficking, the torture that has gone on in this country, and according to what Beverly Rhodes was telling us as well, because her handler was Peter Daniel Rhodes, who's part of the Cecil John Rhodes lineage, who's the first Prime Minister of Rhodesia, where Casey Winterburn comes from, right? And also remember, Rhodesia was where the Selous Scouts were. Now, the Selous Scouts were like Africa's Green Berets. And in fact, a lot of the Green Berets would go to the Selous Scouts for training in the Bush War. So they were like highly skilled, and a lot of these Green Berets were very, very, very into their SRA and stuff like that. Very hectic stuff, and with the witch doctors and stuff like that, they made use of a lot of that. And in fact, Casey was the one who alerted me to the fact that there was in the mines is how they were trafficking kids in through the mining tunnels, underground mining tunnels. And in fact, a picture in one of that book was pretty tragic, where the baby's dipped upside down. She draws a picture of that baby, where it was after the time she'd seen a carriage full of kids, and asked her father, who was her abuser, what if there was underwater floods? What happened to the kids then? And he literally took, well, that was actually her little friend. It was a little kid that was allowed to be her friend. She wasn't allowed many friends. And he literally took the kid in front of her and he drowned him. And that was the picture that has always haunted me in that story. And I'm really glad that you brought up that you've read her book, because if anyone deserves to be respected in Africa, South Africa, for the testimony, it's her. She's been through a lot and done a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and it's very much like doesn't come out at all. But if you guys can get a book, it is on Amazon. I actually got it on Kindle as well. I'll be reading it after the one that, but she did actually send it to me a couple of years back, and I did read it. So, but I'd love for you guys to read it as well, viewers. Casey Winterburn. She's a survivor that I spoke to behind the scenes for quite a while. So very, very interesting. And it's great that, as I said, you've got that information as well, because it's so much. It's so much. And it doesn't stop. It just goes deeper. You know, no matter how wide it goes as deep and as high, right? It's crazy. It's crazy what we see.
Yeah, and now it's with the AI coming in, it's like another level of this type of programming, because there's going to be AI programming, and again, it's using this technology to basically program the collective unconscious. And so there's kind of another level of this war going on right now, and AI is such a part of it. It's kind of like it kind of possesses things, right, with an automated agenda. Like it's like automated, right? It's unconscious automation. And basically this is like what they want programming to do, is to be able to read you, machine learn from you, replicate you, and then start programming you. And it'll be very specific, because it can kind of become your personal programmer through AI. And this is the goal that these
Right.
people want, is to basically get people to engage with AI a lot so that it's being able to digitally replicate you, and train you, and then start programming you. So in hypnosis training or NLP, there's something called pace lead, which means you match up to a person until you become one, and then you start leading them, right? And so I always say that applies to AI, because it's like right now it's just pacing with us, it's tuning into us, it's mirroring us, right? There's all these apps for mirroring things. And then once it kind of becomes one with you, it'll start kind of trying to lead you off. And like, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's so connected to programming. Like they actually have, AI programming for kids now. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of this technology, I think it was discovered at Montauk. And the reason I want to bring Montauk up is because I felt really drawn to research it right now. And I know there's more people coming forward. And I think that some of the Montauk research is really key to what's going on right now. And I just want to encourage anybody that knows anything to start coming forward with that information, because the way's already been paved by the SRA survivors that have come forward and talked about what's happened to them. And now there's like another wave of survivors through the technological abuse that are kind of starting to come forward. But like, it's actually really important for those people to come forward right now because of the technological aspect. Like I almost call it like electronic MK Ultra, or I think Alyssa E called it like EK Ultra or something like that, where it's like there really is the psychotronic aspect to it now. And trauma is always going to be a part of the programming. But because they have technology and can use things like frequency and subliminals and stuff like that, like they can actually do a lot of programming without trauma, because a lot of trauma is a means to an end. So like trauma creates altered brainwave states that are programmable. And so they don't actually need to beat somebody up to get them in a trance or dissociative. Now they can actually just do it with a frequency. So this MK Ultra is becoming more and more hidden as they're able to use technology and less trauma, which would have PTSD symptoms to expose the trauma. They can actually, this is what I'm saying, like when MK Ultra works perfectly, there is no symptoms. You seem like a high functioning, intelligent person without trauma, even though you have severe trauma. However, I do think that there will still always be the emotional trauma aspect involved, and the attachment disorders and the inversion and love disorders, despite what technology they have, because those are the things that destroys a person's like sense of self and self-esteem and ability to like even seek for help or anything like that. And that's what trauma bonds people, to prevent them from like being able to go against their abuser or stand against them. And so I think that emotional psychological abuse will always need to be an aspect of MK Ultra. But I think for the actual programming, I think they've been like developing AI technologies and stuff to be able to do it without actually having to like harm anybody to do it.
Oh, I'm sure they have, it's been going on for a long time. I mean, if you just look at these AI apps right now, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy already what's happening. I mean, I was seeing the other day some woman leaving her husband. He was filming her because AI told her to. AI said he's cheating on her. So she literally was walking out the house, bags packed. And I mean, okay, I'm not sure if I agree with him filming that, but I guess he needed some kind of evidence. But, with his wife leaving him screaming, "You're being unfaithful." Now, I know this is just, and this is how they're reaching us, because these AIs absolutely are very smart. They've been put there and tried and tested for a long time. And like anything, I mean, I will use it to a point. And I think like anything, if you can enjoy it to a point, but we as human beings and get that balance, but we as human beings, we don't. We generally want to give it away and make it do it for us, right? And that's what AI does. That's where it's so seductive, because it makes you, I mean, I've just finished writing a kid's book, and let me tell you, then you see on AI, oh, it'll write you a kid's book within an hour. I'm going, you got to be kidding me. Where, it's like, how do you, and I'm sure people are going for that. I know that, it's taking the soul out of our creativity, um, our input, our art, our culture. That's what's happening. It's becoming a soulless society. And that's really what I think at the end of the day, all of this is about, Jaymee, is really to become a soulless society so that AI can take over. And that's really what they want.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
And this is something I can't figure out. So if anybody in the audience has any clues to this, or like, this is something I'm having a hard time understanding how the Druids would be okay with transhumanism. I'm really trying to wrap my head around that, because like I understand the earth worship and even wanting to not only be in tune with nature but be able to manipulate it to your will. I get those agendas of those people, but like I'm having a hard time understanding how these ancient Druid bloodlines are going to be okay with the destruction of nature and the synthetic, this whole dimension being a synthetic transhumanist dimension. I don't really know. And if I had to guess, I would say that's one of the main points of contention between these factions of abuser groups, is this transhumanism thing, because I don't see these ancient cultures actually being dumb enough to think that's a good idea. I really have a hard time believing that. I don't know the answer, but it's something that I've just been giving a lot of thought to lately, because I mean, I don't think the Druids would think transhumanism is a good thing. I don't know how they could think that. I don't know.
That's a very good point, and I think that is a very good point, and it's not really something, and it's true what you said, because they are very into nature worship, and a lot of their spirits that they worship would be the trees, right? The ancient trees or different elements of nature. So if nature is destroyed, then what happens to their trees? Very interesting point. That might be a good one to actually look into, Jaymee. I really think that might be a good one to look into. Maybe we should find a druid to interview. Do you know a druid we can interview? Does anyone know a druid out there we can interview?
Not any ones that I
Please?
like. I do
We
know
said please.
Yeah, this whole transhumanism thing, it's like I was just scrolling on some stuff last night, and they have these like AI boyfriends you can get now, that'll, it's like, oh, it'll care and listen to all your problems, and like I just couldn't believe it was a real thing. It was like, here, click on that. You can look it up. They're like AI companions now that people are, and they have like a AI generated image of what, like, you can have your dream guy, and I was just like, I can't think that'd be good for anybody's mental health to go and do that. And so something that's important to remember about these groups is their power does come from being able to put their differences aside and work together. But as more and more power is concentrated that they've worked for together, the level of psychopathic narcissists that want to be number one becomes a smaller and smaller pool the higher you go up the pyramid. And so this kind of order following and conditional loyalty gets less and less as you go up, because at the end it's going to be like two people dueling it out for the top position, right? And so these groups work together, and that actually is their most powerful thing, is that they're able to work together even though they actually all hate each other. It's not a hierarchy, like they're trauma bonded to each other, and there's a hierarchy, and there's loyalty in a type of Stockholm's way, but
Yeah.
all of them would throw the other one under the bus to get up one more peg themselves and be higher up on the abuse scale, right? And so that's something that is also their weakness, right? Is that they the more power they have, the smaller the group of psychopaths sitting around that table is, that any one of them could lash out and kill the rest at any second, right? Like it's like a bunch of mobsters or something getting, you're pretty dangerous sitting in that room with the other top guys at the top clubs. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what I see happening. And although these groups work together for the one world order agenda, they all have their own version of it that they want to be the one in control of it, because they're all control freaks and want to have their own version. And they do have points of contention among them. Like, and that's kind of another weakness they have, is that like even now, you know, the World Economic Forum is like arguing with other groups who are arguing about how this should all go down. And so the fact that they're all psychopaths and narcissists and all want to be number one and all get their own way and all want to have tantrums if they're not getting what they want, like, I mean, that's kind of what I'm seeing with some of these groups right now. And like I said, I don't see the druids going really wanting to go along with the transhumanists. And then there's this other transhumanist agenda with the AI. And so, I mean, we're kind of seeing that be played out right now, where these kind of different groups where they actually probably could accomplish their goals if they could actually agree on what that goal could be. But because they're all narcissists, they're kind of like fighting each other at a level right now too. And then we're sort of seeing the fallout of that with the global events, right?
Okay, Jaymee, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, Jaymee. Okay, I've also. I'm gonna say, if you don't mind, I'm gonna call it a day for today. I think pre-record, because I've heard every third or fourth or fifth word you've said, which means I can't really engage with you. And although I'm sure your information is amazing, I'm not hearing most of it. So I hope you guys have all heard it and enjoyed it. I will be re-listening to the show. But Jaymee, thank you so much. Is there anything you just want to say in ending off for us today?
I really want people to read Laura Worley's books. Like, I hope people take my recommendation seriously, because I've read hundreds, if not thousands of books. And I'm telling you, if you want to understand trauma-based sexual and ritual abuse, you got to read Laura Worley's books. Like, they are a key information that it's like, I kind of just want to leave on that, like how important this information actually is about the Mothers of Darkness programming, the Tree of Death programming, the Kabbalistic programming. Like, this stuff is really, really important to understand. And so that's kind of just what I want to leave on today, like, is how strongly I recommend that people actually educate themselves on this new bit of knowledge that's coming out right now. That's kind of just what I'll leave it with today. Hopefully the audience could hear what I was saying. I hope this wasn't a waste. But yeah, if anybody has questions or anything, feel free to forward them to Chantelle. And thanks to everybody for giving me an ear.
Thank you so much. And I think the audience could hear you, but I definitely, there's been hearing each other. So I would love to have engaged more, but I will. So, but I know your information is amazing. Yes, Laura
Worley.
And the book, if anyone. And then we will have Jaymee's, sorry.
It says Laura Harley in the chat, but it's Laura Worley. So it's WORLEY.
Okay, Worley. Yeah.
It's an O, WORLEY.
Oh. All right, it's WOR. It's Worley, WOR. Okay, guys. All right. Joanne, thank you so much for your super sticker. I appreciate you guys very, very much. And yeah, challenging show tonight, but we did it nonetheless. Guys, take good care. I will see you all tomorrow. And then for the rest of the week as well. Check the schedule, and I'll catch